was eating lunch with someone the other day who checked their phone no less than 10 times in 45 minutes. At least half the times they checked, they apologized to me, but none of the apologies were strong enough to stop them from checking their phone. Digital multitasking has become the norm for young adults today. Rarely will you see people together without a device visible. Rarely will you see a young adult do anything without their smart device within reach. If you read the Bible often enough, you'll find that stories unfold over time and they speak to different dimensions of your heart. The Mary and Martha story is like that for me. It doesn't talk about technology and it doesn't talk about digital multitasking. It talks about the heart of a multitasker. And that's why I think it's worth sharing up front as we talk about our obsession with digital multitasking. In Luke 10:38-42, Jesus was traveling and doing ministry in a variety of places. He came to a town where two sisters, Mary and Martha, welcomed him into their house. Mary took advantage of the opportunity to host Jesus by sitting at his feet and listening to his teaching, while Martha got busy with all the tasks of hosting. Martha was running around the house making sure that everyone's needs were met while Mary sat with Jesus. Of course, as anyone who has a sibling will agree, when you're doing chores and your sibling is doing nothing, it doesn't sit well with your soul. Martha does the only thing that makes sense. She tells on Mary. She says, "Jesus, you're the one in charge here. Would you tell my sister to get off her can and come help me with all this stuff?" And Jesus, ever mindful of Martha's multitasking heart, simply replied, "Martha, Martha, you're anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken from her." And that's it. Luke doesn't tell us how Martha responded or what happened after that moment, but here's what I love about that story as a young adult multitasker. I'm distracted by all my tasks, and I'm anxious and troubled about many things. I feel like I don't have any choice but to be anxious and troubled about those many things. Jesus' words to Martha remind me that we do have a choice to make. Mary had chosen the good portion. Both Mary and Martha had the same opportunities to be distracted by many things, but only Mary had the courage to set aside multitasking and focus on the best thing. Us multitaskers, we follow similar thought patterns to Martha. Maybe Martha thought that she would still hear Jesus' teaching from the kitchen. Or maybe she thought that while she passed out rolls and refilled drinks, that she would just kind of get the gist of what Jesus was saying. But the truth is that we aren't made to multitask. Martha, the story says, was distracted with much serving, while being anxious and troubled about many things. Martha was a hot mess trying to do everything, while Mary was a soul at rest, having chosen to do one thing. Martha was the multitasker, while Mary was the necessary tasker. Martha gets rebuked by Jesus, while Mary gets rewarded. So how about you? Are you a hot mess or are you a soul at rest? Are you constantly distracted or are you singularly focused? Does Jesus get your full attention, or does he need to put his hand on your shoulder and give you a gentle shake? I said that we're not created to multitask, and there's a mounting field of evidence to that end. One of the empty promises of technology is that it'll make us more efficient so that we have more time for leisure. But the past 30 years have seen just the opposite occur. The advances in technology, specifically digital communications and smart devices, have completely altered our notions of space and time. We now live in a world with hardly any private spaces and private moments. The phone in my pocket makes me accessible to anyone at any time, no matter where I am. I think that there are three main reasons that we elevate multitasking. It starts with our cultural celebration of it. Sherry Turkle says in her book Alone Together that the ability to multitask was once the golden skill required for the next generation of workers. Our world celebrates people who can multitask, and so we get a nice pat on the back for taking on as much as possible. But there's also a biochemical reward system in our bodies for multitasking. Whenever we switch tasks, we get a small shot of dopamine because of the sense of adventure we experience for beginning something new. The novelty of the new experience, even if it's a mundane thing, is exhilarating to our brain. We don't even notice it, but our brain is doped up every time we get a notification. And finally, if we're being totally honest, focusing on one thing can be exhausting. Many of us welcome the distractions that come from our phone. Gary Keller mentions in his book One Thing that this dopamine hit can actually become an addiction. When we are forced to sustain our focus, like when we're listening to a friend go on and on about something over lunch, our brains get bored with doing that one thing, and they tell us that it wants something new. The ping of our inbox, the vibration of our device, or the little cues on our apps letting us know that something is there are welcome distractions to a generation who names being bored as one of their biggest problems. We've become addicted to the rush of multitasking, and we can't imagine a day without our devices. In the midst of the cultural celebration of multitasking, the internal reward system generated in our body, and the simple ease of the practice, I still hear the gentle and resolute voice of Jesus saying, "Charlie, Charlie, you're distracted and anxious about many things, but you have a choice." Multitasking is simply not possible. I know what you're going to say. I can walk, chew gum, and text all at the same time. Keller talks about that in his book too. He says that you can do multiple things at once, but you can't focus on multiple things at once. Our brains are incredibly efficient. They develop systems to help us cut corners and use less mental energy. Walking is something you've been learning since your toddler years. Over time, the brain has generated circuitry so detailed that you can literally walk in your sleep. So let me demonstrate our inability to multitask using the walk, chew, and text example. What happens when you're doing all three and you bite your tongue? Or you realize that you don't know which way you're supposed to go, or the person that you're texting says they just lost their job. Immediately, you'll stop doing the other two functions and you'll focus on the one that requires primary attention. When we think we're multitasking, we're actually switching back and forth between functions at an incredibly high rate. When something requires our focus, like a pain response in our tongue, confusion about our location, or an emotional stimulus from our friend, we become aware that we're not actually doing all three simultaneously, but rather switching back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Our brains are like our computers. We can open a bunch of windows at once, but we can only work on one at a time. How many windows are you trying to manage at any given moment in the day? Or how quickly are you bouncing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth? Young adults, we are distracted and anxious about many things. Time and time again, studies are revealing that multitaskers are less productive in their tasks. They're more stressed and they're less relational. The cultural, personal, and relational cost of multitasking are too high for us to ignore. Jesus invites us into the fullness of every moment, but he does it in a completely countercultural way. He doesn't invite us to pack as much into every moment as we can. Fullness is not determined by the quantity of tasks that we can push into a 60-second moment. Our ignorant multitasking leads to the illusion of omnitasking. We're a generation who believes that at any given moment we can do everything from anywhere. It's just not true. The fullness of every moment comes in recognizing the highest quality investment that can be made in any given moment. We, like Martha and Mary, have a choice to make. Will we choose the necessary thing, the good portion that cannot be taken, or will we choose the many distractions that bring anxiety and trouble to our souls? I want to end this video by asking simple questions that come from The Unhurried Life by Alan Fadling. The questions get at the heart of the multitasker, and it's worth spending some focused time reflecting on. Was Jesus ever distracted or anxious? Was Jesus ever in a rush? I live my life at 110 miles per hour. My days fly by, the weeks feel non-existent, and this past year I woke up realizing that I'm 30 and a third of my life was behind me. If we aren't intentional about focusing our tasks and choosing fullness based on quality, not quantity, we're going to be swept along at the unsustainable pace of the digital age. I have a friend who says that his favorite feature on his phone is airplane mode. I like that. I like that someone I know is making a conscious choice to focus on the good portions that cannot be taken away. Someone that I know is living in the fullness of every moment, keeping pace with Jesus. Someone I know is choosing the unforced rhythms of grace that Jesus talks about in Matthew 11. Young adults, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to Jesus. Get away with him and you'll recover your life. He'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with Him and work with Him. Watch how He does it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. Keep company with Jesus and you'll learn to live freely and lightly.